Today I'm going to show you how I make sauerkraut. Just cabbage and salt. This is how I make it. It's a very simple procedure. I've been doing it for about 4 years. You need to start with one beautiful head of cabbage, a cutting board, and a knife. 1 tablespoon of salt, sea salt, a quart jar with a regular lid, and a bowl, a large bowl. So what you're going to do is start with your cabbage. I generally will take off the outer 2 leaves of cabbage and just set those aside. And we're going to use that at the end to push down all of the sauerkraut under the juices to keep everything submerged in the process of fermentation. Take another one, about a third one, just for good measure. Plus it has a few little blemishes on it, and I don't really want to mix that in the goods that you eat. The stuff on the top we just end up throwing away after it's fermented anyways. So we'll set that there. Now, everything else looks pretty good. If there's any darkened spots or places that look kind of funky, I just cut those off. Simple kind. It's kind of a cumbersome creature, a head of cabbage, so I try to cut it into pieces so it's a little bit more manageable. Even like quarter it and start with a wedge. Now, I like my sauerkraut to have a little bit of texture. You can also use a food processor for this part if that's your preference. It just usually makes it smaller pieces. But I like a little bit more texture, and it's also easy for my 2-year-old to pick up. 1.5-year-old, excuse me. Don't let me get ahead of myself here. So I just make like really thin slices, but not like super duper thin. Like out on the outer layers, it's still gonna be like this, and that's fine. And I'll cut it in half so those super long ones get cut in half. I'll probably skip ahead here to the end of me cutting, and then we'll move forward. But when you're done chopping it, just put it in the bowl. And even if there's big chunks like that, that's cool. Gives it a little extra character in the end. Now when I get to the core here, I just kind of cut around it, so the sections are a little more misshapen, shall we say, than the top part. But that's fine because you're all just cutting it up into tiny pieces anyways, so it really doesn't matter. And I usually try to get as much of the cabbage as I can around that core, because why not? Alright, so now I've cut up all the cabbage, and I'm going to take my salt and a generous tablespoon. So 1 tablespoon of salt per 1 head of cabbage. So we sprinkle the salt on the top. We have all of our beautiful cabbage cut up, and I'm just going to put my hands in there and kind of move everything around, lifting the stuff from the bottom to the top, and thus the things from the top to the bottom. And the salt should cover everything, and you'll see almost instantly it's like it makes the cabbage wet. I kind of like to squeeze it a little bit too, because it almost like breaks down the structure of the leaves a little bit more and gets that salt in there, because eventually these leaves are just gonna be limp. So we'll come back to it in about 15 minutes. If it is hot out, I don't really worry about it in the winter or on a rainy day like today, but if it is hot out, if you have like bugs in your kitchen, fruit flies or whatever, I typically will cover my bowl with a plate just in between those 15 minutes so the bugs can't get inside. And I'll even set the leaves that are going to be on the outside or on the top on top of that while it's covered. So just a little FYI of how I do it when it's a little hotter out. All right, it's been about 15 minutes, so we're gonna come back and check on this. Take these outer leaves off of the top. Everything looks, it's pretty shiny. And so I'm just putting my hands down and getting handfuls of it and just kind of squeezing them. And you can feel the juice, the water coming out. So, keeping in mind that I keep this a very clean process, so the counters around me, my hands, everything is very clean. So if it does get on the counter, just throw it back in the bowl. No worries. It's definitely working. If you were in a super hurry, you could totally put this in a jar right now. I'm probably gonna wait another 10 minutes probably and come back and do this again and then put it in the jar. All right, now it's time to jar it up. Take off these outer leaves, just set them aside. We have our 1 quart jar. Take the lid off. We're just gonna move it around some more. Now there's a lot of liquid on here at this point, which is exactly what we want. I'm gonna squeeze it some more. You can see all that, right? All right, we're gonna take our jar in one hand, and I do this over the bowl because there's bound to be stuff falling out when you're putting it in the jar. And I'm just pushing it down as far as it'll go. And we'll just keep putting more in there. And there's plenty of liquid in here. And since we're gonna have multiple jars that we're filling, it's a good thing that we have plenty of these outer leaves to push down all the contents within. So if you can see my fingers, that's about where the cabbage is pushed down to. Knife, fork, something like that, and push it down along the sides to let any air bubbles out, and you can see them too. So as you move it around, you can see the air bubbles come up. So I just go all the way around. So I'm gonna push it down one more time after we did that. And we're leaving some extra space here so we can put these outer leaves in there. Now I'm just gonna take this one, kind of fold it in half, and then push it down in there. One side and then the other. There's a lot of liquid in here. We might have to pour some off. It'll make it easier to work with. So now I'm just gonna push this outer leaf down. Make sure all of the cabbage is on there. Underneath there, I mean, excuse me. Ta-da! And so the liquid is about to where this bump is on the glass jar. That's about perfect. Typically I'll set it in the cupboard so it stays nice and dark. I'll put it on a plate, a pie dish, something like that, because over the course of the next 3 days, I would say, it's possible the juices will start to come out around it and leak, and you don't want it to leak on your cupboards. You can even name your sauerkraut, infuse it with intentions, all kinds of good mana there, yummy, yummy stuff. And anytime really that you want to break into it, go for it. After about 3 days, like, it's fair game. If you need it for medicine, if you're just craving on some kraut, just get in there and love it up. Now when you do open it, when you unscrew it, it's very possible that juices are gonna come out. It's alive. This is a living thing. And so when you open the lid, all of these bubbles will come up and it'll push the sauerkraut up even, and juices will come out over it. So I like to open it over the sink usually, just for that reason. There's nothing like just cabbage and salt. Cabbage and salt. Just cabbage and salt. Nothing else can replace it, in my opinion, and in my life, and I love it so dearly. And I'm so glad that I could share this experience with you, and I so wish to hear about your experience with sauerkraut. Yay!